and I'm very grateful. Thank you. Okay, so welcome everyone to this evening. This evening, I am delighted to have a guest speaker here. We're going to be hearing from Natalie Burns. She's the founder of Homeschool Teaching Simplified. And she has a podcast, she has excellent social media sites, and from what I can understand is Natalie is like your coach. So you're homeschool mom, you need a little help, you need a little bit of encouragement, and you can talk to Natalie. So she's a certified teacher turned homeschooling mom herself. Natalie is on a mission to empower homeschooling moms with the tools to teach critical thinking skills without sacrificing your time from the core subject areas, so you can experience your child taking initiative for their learning. Natalie loves to talk about why thinking is the most important thing you can teach in your homeschool and how you can adapt proven teaching and learning strategies to draw out higher levels of thinking in your child. Natalie infuses intuitive approaches so you can connect more deeply with your child through a done-for-you experience, embracing the freedom to reflect who you are as a family without the restraint of constantly meeting someone's expectations, even if they are your own. So I would like to welcome Natalie. Let's give her a warm welcome. And she's going to be talking on the 8 learning styles. So welcome.
Yes. Well, I'll take you.
Yes, you should take that.
Thank you. Okay. Well, it's nice to see you all again. I get to usually see you from the backs of your heads. So it's nice to get to see your smiling faces. Thank you for joining us here tonight. Like Hester said, my name is Natalie Burns, and I've met many of you. And for the ones that I haven't met, hello, it's so nice to meet you. And I'm going to be talking today about the 8 learning styles. So maybe you have heard of some different kinds of learning styles, and maybe you didn't realize that there were 8 of them. And we will look at how you can access the way that your child tends to naturally think and learn best through their learning style, and even what your learning styles tend to be, so that you can see how you can connect more deeply with your child through the way that you approach teaching them. So the first thing that I want you to think about is, like, what is your general style? Maybe with clothes. Like, what's your style with clothes? What do you tend to wear? Are you just looking at lounging clothes? Do you love to wear skirts and dresses? Do you love to just be in sweatpants all day? What's your personal style? And even with music, what's your style of music? What kind of music do you naturally tend to connect with, and like it moves your soul the most? Because what's the kind of music for one person, definitely, and you get in the car with them and you think, that's not my style, then you know what your style is. And then also, even like when you're in the car and you're driving past a home and you think, oh my goodness, I could totally see myself living there, that is perfectly my style. Or let's drive a little faster and not look at this anymore. So it's really obvious once you start to understand yourself and your style, what you tend to gravitate towards and what tends to sink in naturally. So it's really the same when it comes to learning, and for yourself with learning or for your child with learning. There are different ways that we tend to just feel like it's easier to process the information. And in other ways, you might say, can you write it down for me? Or can I see this on a map to understand what you're talking about here? So what we are going to talk about, the big idea today, is that when you provide these different varied opportunities for your child, you help them tap into understanding themselves and how they tend to process information. So what's really important is not necessarily that you know how your child thinks and learns. It's important that they know how they think and learn, because as they go through life and they meet all of these new experiences, they are going to need to know how to process that and how to think through it. So by helping your child understand their learning style, you're actually setting them up for whatever comes their way. So for the visual learners, or even for the kinesthetic who are like, I need to touch something, I have some handouts. I have some that are larger if you need that to see better, and then I also have some that are smaller. So I'll pass those around, and then you can join me on that. So these are the bigger ones. These are some of the smaller ones. There, you can have that. Okay, so as you get that passing around, what are some of the things that you're going to get out of this talk today? What are the results that you can actually experience? Oh, I have more actually too. That you can experience here. Kira, can you pass this back? So the biggest thing that you can experience for yourself is that you will be more relaxed with your homeschool days. When you can tap into the way that your child wants to learn and wants to go about things, it's just going to be a lot more relaxed and easier for you. So that, like, we could just stop right there. That's already a huge win, but there are more benefits for your child. So another benefit is that when your child is learning something in the way that they tend to process information better, they're actually going to learn more and they're going to learn more deeply. So that's really important, especially if you're looking at, well, you're trying to go a mile wide and an inch deep, or do you really want to go a mile deep into this? So this is going to really help them to process that way. And another big thing is that you have less pushback, less resistance, less fighting about what you're doing, because it's more enjoyable, it's more meaningful, and it's relevant to them. So obviously by the title, as you can see, the 8 learning styles, we're going to be looking at 8 of them, and we're going to follow along in the workbook. Actually, Hester, can I borrow that for a second? Absolutely. I just want to go through on the second page what the objectives are. So this workbook actually comes from inside of a membership that I have. And we did this as like a whole month as a theme. And then we went through challenges. So each week you can actually take that information and apply it into your homeschool. So that's why it's set up in this way about the challenge. And you are welcome to do this as well in your home. So here are the objectives that you will get by the end of this talk today. You will know which learning styles your child needs to think and learn most naturally. You will know which learning styles you tend to process information best through. You will be able to adapt the way that you teach now to highlight any of these styles. You'll be able to increase engagement in the learning process by helping your child connect more easily to the concept that they're learning. You'll be able to create varied opportunities for your child to showcase their learning without sacrificing your record keeping. And you'll be able to understand how to speak about your child's strengths and weaknesses in a way that fosters positive belief systems within themselves. Thank you. All right, so hopefully you're not speed reading here too fast just yet. I have a quick little like interaction quiz. So feel free, don't raise your hand, just call it out. Think about what learning styles you already know about. And I'm going to give a couple of examples, and I want you to just call out if you know what kind of learning style that might tap into. So watching number blocks to teach math. Visual? No. There's more than one right answer. Musical. Yeah, musical. Yeah. Yeah. What about taking a swing dance class? Kinesthetic. Musical. Swing dance is usually with a partner too. Interpersonal. Yeah, interpersonal. What about reading books at the classical education bookstore? What would that tap into? To come here and read books for a while. Visual. Logical. No. Linguistic. Yeah.
Interpersonal.
Yeah, potentially, especially if you're reading two other people and interacting with that together. If you're by yourself, intrapersonal, totally. So there are more than one right answer for these, because a lot of the activities that we do tap into more than one at a time. So it's not going to be necessarily super segregated, but we are going to talk about them one at a time as well, just to make sure that we have a solid understanding about what I'm talking about with each one of them. But first, I want to show you this joke. It's kind of a joke, but it's also a little bit too true, so that part isn't funny. This is a joke that you may have seen. I don't know. There's a man at a desk, and then there are a bunch of different animals in front of him. And you've got a monkey, a penguin, an elephant, a fish in a bowl on a stick. And the man is saying, for a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. Is this resonating? Did you experience that? Maybe if you were not a second generation homeschooler like Hester, maybe you had a classroom experience and this is what it was like. Or maybe you pulled your child out of the classroom because this is what it was like. And you have all of these different people, all of these different styles, all of these different ways of thinking. And the assessment isn't measuring that. And your child then is thinking, well, how do I line up according to this? Actually, Albert Einstein is quoted as saying, everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. And so that could be a strong reason why some of us may be homeschooling, because we want our children to be able to showcase what they actually understand, what they know, and what their unique talents and abilities are. And so when we can tap into these different ways of thinking and learning, then our children don't need to feel like they're being measured by some other standard other than what they are good at for themselves. So I have an extra if anyone wants to look at it again. All right. So actually, I had someone named Stephanie recently tell me, now my intuition is telling me that what I'm doing isn't working. And it's telling me what my child's strengths are, but I don't know what to do with that. And so maybe you are looking at your child and thinking about your children like this comic, this joke, and thinking, okay, well, I understand that my children need something specific. And I maybe even know, skimming these learning styles, what that is. But how do I do that? How do I actually go about doing that? And how do I do that in a way that, say, for somebody who's kinesthetic and wants to show their understanding of physics and motion by swinging on a swing in the forest, and you need to report that somehow, and you're like, yeah, they learned about motion. How can you prove that? So we are going to unpack some of these nuances here now. And the big thing is that you do have an intuition that is kicking in. So you want to listen to that because you really can do this. You are the one that knows your child the best, and you know what they need. You've watched them for many, many years. You understand exactly when they're telling you a sincere need versus trying to get out of doing something. And so when it's those sincere needs, we definitely want to honor them by adapting what we do to allow them to work in that way. And also, if you don't know how to do that yet, that's totally normal. It's not your fault that you don't know necessarily how to tap into these different ways, because no one's ever told you before. This is something that I went to like 5 years of schooling for and studied in the classroom. I was a high school biology and dance teacher before I worked as an HLST with RCOA, and then now homeschooling my own children as well. So I understand how these strategies look for children and how to adapt them from the classroom setting to instead be for the home setting. And that's one of the big reasons why I thought, well, I need to start this business, because many people don't know these nuances, and it makes life so much easier, and it makes your relationship so much better. Because I was really shocked when I became an HLST and I realized just how many families were fighting through everything. I thought that's not what it's supposed to be like. It's not supposed to be a push and a fight all the time. And we want this to be an enjoyable experience for everybody, including ourselves as moms, right? So the tool that we are going to look at and give you for your tool belt today is this theory of the multiple intelligences by Dr. Howard Gardner, which I'm calling the learning styles just for ease, but essentially the technical name is the multiple intelligences, and it's been around for a really long time. And there is a chart on page 6 if you want to look at it all in one. And we will get into the details, but I do want to say that we're not looking at this just because it's more fun or more enjoyable for everybody, which it is, but really, this is all backed by quite a bit of research, and research by people who really care about children and about how to study the way that they think and learn best so that we can actually support them and grow them in their thinking. So there are a few studies here, like Hattie in 2011 found that providing children with multiple ways to access content improves learning. Darling Hammond in 2010 found that providing children with multiple ways to demonstrate knowledge and skills increases engagement and learning and provides teachers and mothers with more accurate understanding of students' knowledge and skills. And then Tomlinson in 2014 found that instruction should be informed as much as possible by detailed knowledge about the child's specific strengths, needs, and areas for growth. And it really makes me think about Charlotte Mason and about how her first principle is that children are born persons. They're not just empty containers or blank slates that we shape to be what we want them to become. We need to teach them and meet them where they're at for who they are and who they were created to be. And so when we can understand how to find that about them and then draw that out of them even further, that's a really powerful piece of them starting to understand who they are and how they tend to think and learn. Um, Now, if we try to help them figure it out faster, sometimes it can backfire. So, if we say to somebody something like, oh, well, you're a visual learner, then maybe they are. And maybe we just have missed some of the early cues that haven't fully developed yet in them. And so they may go many, many years and in their 30s have to figure out, okay, well, who am I? What How do I process things? How do I think about things? And I don't know about you, but this was my experience. As I got older, I had to break down and think, okay, well, I was being told for a very long time who I am and what I should think and what I should do. And so now I have to unpack all of that and then relearn, who am I and how do I want to go about doing things? And so you can give such a gift to your child if you allow them now to start learning who they are and how they tend to think. Okay, so let's get into these here. If you want to go to page 3, it's all broken down there. The first one is visual spatial, visualizing the world in 3D. So if your child tends to think this way, you could watch documentaries for history or create posters to show off what was learned. Maybe you could help them find an app that they can design spaces. So, somebody who is very visual may go on to become a sonographer, like an ultrasound technician, where they have to look at something like upside down and backwards in all these different dimensions. So, that's a visual spatial kind of thinker. Ways that you could teach to this kind of learner would be to like watch a movie or a documentary or teaching video about that concept. And a way for your child to show off their learning for that would be to maybe create an infographic or a poster or to highlight in some way what that key information was that they learned. For those that are naturalistic, this is understanding living things and reading nature. So if your child tends to think this way, you can obviously present learning through like nature observation, nature walks, nature journaling, but it's not actually just about being outside. Nature has a lot of patterns in it. And so anytime that you can pull patterns and highlight patterns in whatever you're doing, that also taps into that naturalistic way of thinking. So, some ways you can teach to this way would be to learn that new concept while outside, maybe sitting on a blanket, hiking, gardening, for example. Like you could look at math and arrays in a box, like how many can you plant given these different dimensions. And then a way that your child could showcase their learning would be to consider and explain if what they're learning maybe aligns with the golden ratio in nature or as a reflection of nature. And so the golden ratio is basically saying that there are different ratios of um, lengths that are considered to be like the most beautiful and pleasing to the eye. Yeah. And then for the musical intelligence, discerning pitch, sound, tone, rhythm. Can your child show their learning through a song maybe that they write and even perform? You could try memorizing using songs or a sing song kind of expression. For example, a lot of people learn the ABCs by singing the ABCs because it really helps to connect that into the brain. Or even having varied expression in a monologue can help somebody memorize that whole monologue if they're going to recite it. So, a way that you can teach for someone who's a musical way of thinking is to watch a talented musician perform before learning about the instrument, culture, or concept from the words, even in the music. And then a way that you can allow your child to showcase their learning there would be to create a song or perform a dance that represents that idea or concept that they learned. And then for bodily kinesthetic, coordinating your mind with your body, a really great way is to allow your child to pace or bounce, to actually move while they're learning. There are some children that if they sit there and try to tell you whatever they've learned or understood, they just cannot come up with whatever it was. But if they're walking around, then it's super easy for them to just verbally share with you. You can, for example, teaching phonics. You could try putting letters onto dots on the floor and have them hop from dot to say the letter sound and then to sound out words in that way. So another way you could teach that would be to follow along with reading or listening by drawing a realistic or abstract interpretation of what the concept represents. So it just keeps the body moving while they're listening. And a way that they could showcase their learning, you could try going on a field trip to highlight the experience and have them connect that experience and explain that to you, how it applies in real life. For the logical, mathematical way of thinking, quantifying, making hypotheses, and evaluating results, this is breaking down information into simple steps, tackling just one piece of information at a time. You'll find that some children need to know the full picture. They need to know the full ending in order to even start. But other people just need it like one tiny piece at a time, like they're following the recipe one step at a time. So this kind of thinking really shines during experimental learning. Logical processes, though, do not need to be formal. You could do something like a mail order mystery or an escape room. Those are very great for the logically minded. You can also teach this way by following along with reading or listening through notebooking, creating a personal set of notes that linearizes whatever they're learning. And they can show you and showcase that learning by maybe rewriting what they learned in a point form summary, for example. For the interpersonal, those that are really great at sensing other people's feelings and motives and like to be part of the group dynamic, for any subject area, you can have your child apply their idea in a way that makes the community a better place. So, for example, maybe they design a rain catchment system for a community when you're talking about the water cycle. Or maybe you can study a business that is utilizing a new concept that is good for the community. And then in terms of having them showcase their learning, they do really well with something like a group discussion kind of format. For intrapersonal, understanding yourself, what you feel, what you want. If your child thinks this way, then they probably love reflection questions. There is a free challenge that I have online where we have a traffic light example. So imagine a picture of a traffic light with the red, the yellow, and the green. So you could have your child write either in the circle or beside the circle or draw what's green, good to go. I totally get this concept from either the lesson or the day or the unit. Or what is yellow? Like I'm not sure. Proceed with caution here or slow down. Or red, stop. I don't get it. I don't know what's going on here. I have to ask some questions about this. So that way they can see what areas and they will reflect upon what they understand. And you get to see what kinds of things they wrote down and what they understand and what maybe you want to readdress maybe tomorrow or later. And another idea that you could do is discussing with them an open ended question that is really personally relevant. So, something that taps into how they think and feel about themselves. So, maybe with biology, you could ask them, what would it be like if your skeleton was actually outside, on the outside of your body? And then that will get them thinking totally about themselves. But now they're going through all of those processes, and it's basically a summary of all of the body systems and how they interact. So it's kind of a tricky way of getting them to summarize everything that they just learned. And they're really loving the kind of showcasing that reflects and connects to personal related experiences. So maybe stories and personal stories about how that idea relates to something that happened to them. And finally, linguistic, finding words to express meaning. So spend extra time discussing and unpacking ideas. Stories are a great way to understand abstract concepts through the lens of a character, which we all know from Hester. And so if your child is not yet writing, they can also dictate to you if they are more inclined to linguistic ways of thinking. You can choose specific educational library books and read those about the new concept, and your child could showcase their learning by maybe writing what they learned as if it was a children's book, or maybe for a younger sibling. Okay, so that was a lot, 8 of those learning styles, but hopefully now you have a better idea about what each of them are, how they're different from one another. So I have a task I need you guys to help me with. If you were here last month and Hester was talking about math and about how she doesn't know how to teach astronomy, I thought that was really hard, and it was hard for me to hear that for you. So I thought, let's help her. We're going to help her out. I've got each of the 8 learning styles here. So in small groups of like 3 or 4, just whoever you're around, you get to pick one of the learning styles, and I want you to think about how could you teach astronomy using that learning style as your focus? Or even how could somebody show their learning about astronomy with that style? And then now you'll know. Okay. So we'll do about maybe 5 minutes or so you have time to discuss.
Yeah, you can go with them. Yeah, however you want to go. I can go with them or whichever way.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me.
Oh yeah, extra handouts, sure. Sorry.
Oh, I don't know.
Here, one more for the other side. You know what? You'll have to share for now, but I can email you one.
And we've already figured it out. She's gonna go. She's just gonna revolve around.
Okay.
Yeah.
I forgot that I have this at least. Yeah. Oh, good, good.
Oh, thank you.
Is this one an extra?
Yes.
Sorry to tease you with this.
I love it.
I thought it'd be silly. What time are we at? Am I
7:30. You got half an hour.
okay? I think that's about right-ish.
You need 45.
I don't have much more to say. I'm going to go through the book, and then it's kind of on the last bits.
Yeah. I feel like that's actually
There is one actually that actually solves. Yeah, I just got out.
There's a star and a big dipper like goes all around it. It's chased around by
All right, about 1 minute left to wrap up your thoughts.
Here there's so much light pollution. Oh, there you go. There you go. Yeah, that's great. That's totally true. No, not actually. Yeah.
All right, think about who in your group might be comfortable sharing what you guys talked about.
I remember seeing the one sunlight. And I was just I spent a lot of time.
All right, let's bring it back in and we'll see what everybody came up with.
I literally want to get shirts for the next conference. I'm just going to say the original, the OG.
Aw.
OG groupies. Yeah.
All right, are you ready to share with each other what you came up with? All right, so I'm going to I have permission to lend you the mic so that somebody from each group can just kind of share a super brief, share with us which learning style you picked and something that you gleaned from that for how you can either teach that way or have your child showcase learning in that style for astronomy. Okay, who would like to volunteer to go first? Thanks, Green. You're the best.
Thanks, guys. Okay, we had kinesthetic, and so what we thought is like obviously someone could be the sun and run around as the moon, or like the earth around the sun, and then you could actually all make shapes with like each person at a point for like a Big Dipper or something like that, make constellations. Or you actually had to measure along maybe a really long wall in your house, and you would actually put the planets and like measure as you went. So like they're kind of walking and measuring. And then the other one we thought would be really fun is an eclipse. Like someone would have like stand in front of like a lamp or something like that. I don't know, just those kinds of fun things.
Those are super fun. Thank you for sharing. Who else would like to share? Yeah, Hester's like, I can do that. Thank you.
So we had musical. So some of the ideas we're singing the order of the planets or singing while orbiting an object. Also, like if you had a drum, you could like put like a little cutout and like drum the shape of the constellations. Also, for like piano or any other musical instrument, you could practice the scales and just have diagrams of the planets on your piano, and so you could go up that way. There's also using a nursery rhyme or a popular song and switching out the words. So like instead of the wheels on the bus, you could say like Galileo invented telescopes, etc. And then the other one was just listening to music while you're actually learning about space and astrology and astronomy. And you could just listen to your favorite music, classical or whatever works.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Who else is feeling brave?
Not necessarily. I don't hear. Naturalist should be like obvious and easy, but then I kept thinking, oh, I think this belongs into a different category. You know, like those apps you can get on your phone and like look up out there, like being out there is what we were. You know, you just get out there with your telescope, your binoculars, look at the things out there, and then maybe making a little journal to see the patterns. So like going through the seasons in the fall, and seeing even the patterns with the comets going by, like every fall there's, you know, a meteor shower or whatever, and just kind of keeping a journal that way. Yeah, those are major ones, keeping track of like, oh, there's another solar eclipse or lunar eclipse coming up, like there's pattern here, like how many years between all these different things, or even, you know, just through the different seasons. So those were my main ones.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Okay, we had intrapersonal, so that was a little bit of a stumper at first, but we were reflecting on how for the person that's interpersonal, they need it to become personal to them, like make sense to them. Like a son that isn't interested in something is kind of like, why would I learn astronomy? That doesn't affect me at all. It doesn't help me. But so making it personal would be like go to a planetarium, make it like an experience. Or like for me, I was thinking of like as a kid, if my mom would said, okay, so it doesn't matter to you, you don't want to learn about astronomy, you write a story for me. And it has to include astronomy, something about the stars, something about the sky, whatever. And I will give you full marks, but you have to, write this story. So I would suddenly become very interested in astronomy, researching it on my own, figuring out how to make this story, make sense. And that to me made, some kind of like a project that makes it personal. Did I get both of our ideas?
Those are fantastic ideas. I love this. Were we going to do this every week for your master? All right.
We had linguistic. So we talked about reading a book or finding some books and then reflecting on it with like a poem, like writing a poem or like a haiku.
As far as we got. I'll share. We got logical or mathematical. So we thought we could get like a log book and then like kind of log the different constellations at different times for the year and kind of make a hypothesis of like what it might be in 6 months based off of like a shorter amount of time. Yeah.
Love that. Okay, we just have maybe a couple more groups. I'll scooch back.
Oh man, I feel completely unqualified for this. I only have a kindergartner and junior kindergartner. So we had interpersonal, and we kind of talked about like making it like a group project, right? And so we had a couple ideas, if I can remember them all. One of them was even the idea of like, if I use my own family as an example, to because you can get like the printout of what the sky looked like the stars looked like on different days. So if I were to print out like what the sky looked like on the day that my daughter was born, and then just show her and be like, look, this is what the sky looked like on the day you were born. So there's kind of like a little more of like an emotional connection to that. Even one of us mentioned like going to the beach at night and like looking at the tides and then like seeing the stars and kind of just like making memories out of learning, right? Like, because you can relate it back to it. And then, Jess had mentioned like Greek mythology, like the different characters and stuff, and even like to act that out in a group and talk about the emotions and the feelings of those different characters, where the constellations can come from. So
Those are great.
Thank you. All right. And are any of you feeling brave to share?
We had the visual spatial. So the first thing obviously that comes to mind is go look at the stars with a telescope or go to the planetarium. Yeah, thanks. Couldn't think of it. Or another idea was that mentioned was use the marshmallows and toothpicks to make the constellations, or use the glow in the dark stars to hang up in their room in the shape of the constellations. Anything else?
Watch Magic School Bus.
Yeah, watch things, shows on that, or posters, make a poster about it. Yeah, probably a few other things, but that was most of it.
Fantastic. Those are great ideas. Okay. I think we got them all. I didn't count 8. Oh, fantastic. Okay, Hester, now do you feel more set?
I feel like we'll do this again next month on
Yeah, which Okay, as you processed this, think about it for a minute. Was that ticket, were you happy with it? Or were you like, oh no, I don't know anything about this. This is not me. So I want you to think about, what learning style do you tend to resonate most with? Where are you like, okay, I definitely connect with this one, and maybe also this one and this one. And then think about also, which of these learning styles do you feel like maybe are your weaker points? And now think about each of your children. They probably don't all have the same strengths and weaknesses as you. They may actually be completely opposite, which can be a little challenging. So I do want to offer a piece of, I guess, wisdom that it's not, okay, I should say I'm ripping the Band-Aid here for a second. Watch out. It's not about you, and it's not about what you like. It's about what your child tends to connect with the most. So let's say you love like whimsical and like beautiful curriculum, and you come here and you're just like, this one, this one, this one, this one, and I have a whole basket of everything that we're going to do. And it's just not them. They want black and white. They want simplified. They want it just like point form, one and done. That can cause a little bit of rub. So think about your child and what they're naturally tending to be drawn towards, more so than what you are naturally tending to be drawn towards. So even if you would love to make everything super musical or very artistic, maybe pick up a watercolor hobby so that not everything has to be that for the like logical mathematical child, right? Is this resonating? I know. All right. So if you are looking for more information, Hester has this book on order. I don't know, it's just 8 Great Smarts, Discover and Nurture Your Child's Intelligences by Kathy Koch. And there's also, I don't know the title and the author of the homeschooling version. 8 Great Smarts for Homeschoolers. Different author, but Kathy Koch writes the introduction for that one, or the something about that. Forward. I think it's the forward.
Same information. Like you really wouldn't need both books. But
Yeah. So Adrian says it's basically the same information. Pick one or the other. So this one definitely could be helpful to you if you're looking at digging into this concept more deeply. And I really like the way that she laid out each chapter with each of the things. There was one thought that because I'm a bit of I like to think, if you haven't guessed, and I thought, we could take this a little bit further. So tell me if you catch this. One of the examples that she gave was, you could tell your child, well, you're self-smart. That's why you came up with that great idea. Does that sound like a great, encouraging thing to say to your child? I think offhand it does. Like, you're self-smart. Like, way to go. That's why you did such a good job. I'm going to propose that it's actually a really damaging thing to say. Because what we do not want to do is tell our children what they're good at, because it implies a linked opposite that they're bad at something else. So if you tell them, well, you have such great people skills, and that's why math is hard for you, don't worry about it, then it's actually going to set them up with this belief system that they're not good at that, and they're not good at thinking that way. They'll never amount to anything that way. They just need to double down in this other area. And it can actually be harmful for them in their later years of life. So instead of, I guess, declaring for them what they are great at, then I would suggest to say something more along the lines of, I'm seeing such growth in your self-awareness. So you don't have to say, you're great at this intelligence, or you're not good at this way, or this is your style, or this isn't. Just, oh, I can really see that this is highlighted here for you. Because one of the things that Kathy talks about in this book is around, well, what happens when you get older and maybe you were really great at a certain style, but you just weren't able to express and grow in that way because you were stunted for some reason. It might have been because somebody told you that you were good at this way, so you just said, okay, well, I'm good at this way, and I guess I won't grow my strengths in another area. Or it could have even been, well, this makes other people happy. My parents are happy, or my teacher is happy if I do things in this particular way. So I'll just focus on that and not do things the way that I actually want to be doing them. Or this is something that's expected of me. So this is why I'll pursue this area. So we definitely, it kind of goes back to that beginning point that we were talking about, where we want our children to discover for themselves how they tend to process information most easily. And this does not mean that they're only going to be doing things in one way. We definitely want to, like Charlotte Mason says, give like a feast of ideas. We want to provide them opportunities for all of these different ways of thinking at different times, of course, not all at once, all the time. But we want to give them these varied opportunities because it allows them to tap into each of these areas, and it allows their strengths to get stronger. And then it allows their weaknesses to also flourish a little bit more as well. So we don't want to necessarily lean into one way or another if that's the way we see our children like to do it. But if they are not clicking with something that they're learning, then try rewinding a little bit and saying, okay, well, how do they tend to allow information to click? Let's start there and then move on. Maybe you want to teach something in the way that they are most apt to learning, and then they showcase their learning in a different style as part of the challenge of that. So that is one thought there. Yeah, I think that was most of the things that I wanted to talk about for that. It's really fun to know what your child's learning style is because it allows you to adapt what you already have to work for your family. So you can actually personalize and customize everything that you have. So like this astronomy thing, you didn't need a curriculum book telling you what to do. You have these ideas and you can come up with those and use that intuition, use your intuition, use what you know about your child, use the resources that you have around you, and you can teach using those kinds of tools. When it comes to choosing curriculum, it can be a lot easier if you don't have to adapt a whole lot, though. So if you already know, okay, my child is really musical and they're struggling with math, maybe I could find a math curriculum that has a bit of a musical ring to it, like say start with number blocks when they're little or something like that, then that can make that adaptation process a little bit easier. And then actually, before I lead into the next thing, I do want to mention that I alluded at the beginning, well, what if your child's learning style is something that's really hard to measure or hard to prove the depth that they really did learn? So for example, if they were swinging on a swing and said like, I learned about motion in physics, then what you could do is allow them to showcase in the way that's best for them. And then when you go to report it, you can ask them some specific open-ended questions and have them answer that via audio and submit that part so that they still get to tap into their own way of thinking, but then you can still satisfy whatever ministry requirements you might have. So speaking of curriculum to make our lives easier, we've got a whole floor downstairs full of curriculum that highlights these different learning styles. So Hester and I teamed up and she pulled her favorites for each of these learning styles. So she's going to share with you so that depending on whatever age your child is and whatever style, that you can have some touch points for where you can look to make that a little bit easier for your homeschool approach.
Sounds good. Okay. This is my favorite part. So I'm going to go through some of these, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Natalie for some questions. We'll do question and answers. So you can get those questions ready. Actually, we're going to start right here with this first basket. So the first learning style is visual spatial. So, but while Natalie was talking and I was thinking of what I chose, everything I chose, I could also pick another category for it. So as we're going over this, I'm going to tell you what I'm suggesting, and then I'd like you to tell me what else you can see. Okay. So I think, like, for geography is a very visual subject, right? You have to be able to see the world, and to do it as a puzzle is absolutely brilliant because you have to see all the detail, but when you're done, you get the big picture, the full picture. So, and I think that puzzles are true generally for visual spatial. But what learning style could a puzzle also fit into? Kinesthetic, absolutely. Naturalistic. There you go.
It's actually interpersonal as well. Because I was trying, when I heard them talking about space, my kids, like my daughter told me, I am not interested in space. That was how we started. I'm like, oh.
Okay.
Okay. So then we found a foam puzzle, and they built this foam puzzle, and now guess who is all interested in space? Because they have how they're personally involved. Well, where am I on the map?
Yeah.
And then where do I find me? So I found that one. Yeah, that was a surprising one for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So there you go. So another one that is very good for visual spatial is coloring books, right? So here's history in a coloring book. And here's biology. This is high school in a coloring book, right? So, right? Doesn't that make a lot of sense? But what else could coloring books appeal to? Like, what other learning style could you use coloring books for? Interpersonal. I like to be by myself, and I like to just sit and color and think about what I'm doing. Suits my inner, yeah, right? Anyone else? It's also kinesthetic. Yes, it's kinesthetic. Yeah.
Naturalist, maybe they could use patterns with their colors.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but I think those ones kind of represented visual spatial. The naturalist, well, that one just, well, Natalie talked about nature study, and that just was brought these ones to mind because they're so these are nature studies, right? And they're so beautiful, and they get you out there, and these books actually spend quite a lot of time looking at patterns. I know, I heard the ooh. And then they have these beautiful visual postcards that go along with it. And then, of course, I don't know if you've seen the Anna Comstock, but she does the same thing. So she gets you out there in nature, reading about what it is you are observing. And then they have these notebooks so that you can take your own notes on what you're seeing in terms of patterns and shapes and behaviors of the animals and the insects and the habitats, right? So nature study is just... And we talk about it all the time in homeschooling, nature, how important nature study is. So now we have a glimpse in that. So what other learning style could we use this for?
Visual, for sure.
Visual.
And body kinesthetic, because you have to be out and about.
So that was when that resonated with me, was the kinesthetic, because we're like, okay, they need to be moving their bodies, they need to learn physically. But what if you had like a nature study that had them going outside with a very specific purpose? Right? So I think bodily kinesthetic would be really good with this.
Could it also be logical?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as a precursor to high school biology, chemistry, physics, that sort of thing, what a nature study does is it's that first logical step. It shows them the the first layer, like the actual creation itself. And once they notice that, then they can dig deeper and get in those further layers. So now they know the anatomy of a tree, and now biology is just so fascinating and naturally the next step. So yes, very much.
Linguistic, because they're trying to find words maybe to express what they're seeing.
Yeah, and also linguistic, because some of these nature studies have like actually kind of a lot of words. Like here's a whole, you can do this part, the book, and then the
They normally have their scientific names too. So
yes.
It's like a huge expansion.
So you could even go into other languages, right? So learning Latin as a foundational for the etymologies. Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, I think we're gonna move on now to musical. Isn't it fun? Isn't it fun? Okay. The first thing that came to my mind when I heard musical was poetry, right? Poetry, and especially so we did this one. My kids and I did this one, and it talks about the cadence. Poetry and cadence, right? And it talks about some of the literary devices and the metaphors, and there's just this kind of lilt and this music that comes along with poetry. And so I think if you have a musical child, try tap into the poetry, right? Okay, there's so many more for that one. Body kinesthetic, this one. So I would say for the higher grades, I didn't choose these for the like very active pictures on the front. I just think that learning to do art can be a very physical process. My kids love to watch Bob Ross, and he's physical, right? The way he's in there with his whole body, and he's so gentle, and he does such a beautiful work of art. But it's such a physical thing. So that's one way that we can do the bodily kinesthetic in a creative way, that we can kind of break them out of their kind of comfort zones. And then for the younger grades, I don't know if you've seen this one, Around the World with Picture Books. This one has you reading through just ordinary everyday picture books, and then you're going to be doing cultural art and cultural cooking and what else? All like you're doing all the different things from all the different countries that are represented in this collection. So this is very kinesthetic for young learners. Okay, and then logical mathematical. So we picked this one out because it is logic, and I think it's very important for kids to learn actually how to think, and actually what is a fallacy, what is a red herring. But then they have to learn humility too, because then they're like, Mom, that doesn't make sense. That's a red herring. You can't. I'm like, so pair it with.
Yeah, don't get that one.
Pair it with humility. But these are actually really, really important. Also, thing to teach your kid, you don't win just because you're shouting the loudest.
And
so
when a dumb argument, you don't need to actually argue.
Yeah, just stop that argument. Yes. So that one's so those I think are really, really important to help our kids have the structure in their minds so that they know how to think and how to debate and how to go through these processes.
I would say, like, if you have a visual learner, if you have none of that, you will have to do some kind of homework as a mom for that.
Yes.
Because it is a lot of talking. And I found, even though I'm an audio learner, I found that I think the visual aspect of it for some of those things actually would be really beneficial.
Yeah. And I think for the actual logical side of things, though, for a visual learner, the news media.
Oh yeah, that's a
let
good
them
one.
watch the news. Drives you. Next. Okay, interpersonal. So for this one, we were thinking, and now this one really ties into linguistics, but I see interpersonal as something that just is tied with linguistics, because when you like being around other people, one of the ways that you interact is with words. But so I like the idea of using literature. And this program in particular it's actually for parents on how to teach literature using the Socratic method. So it would be asking questions. So as an interpersonal discipline, you learn how to ask questions and get to know the others in the room in a way that actually is who they are. Literature shouldn't be taught as in, now I'm going to tell you all about Romeo and Juliet, and I'm going to tell you everything that happened in the story and what you need to think about it, and then we're done. That's not a literature study, right? So to do some of these literature studies in a group or in an audience and learn how to ask questions about what's happening with the characters, with the theme, and with the plot will also help us to will help us to get to know the other person, because we're all going to come up with different perspectives based on our experiences, who we are, and then we'll actually grow. We can grow together over a story. And I think it's one of the best ways, because I'm a literary interpersonal.
We also talked about the mimetics.
Oh,
of
yes,
this one,
yes.
and how you're modeling for your child and they can pick up on those cues.
Yes, thank you, Natalie. So mimetic teaching is a way where you're modeling what you want your student to learn. So that's why this program is really important, because as the teacher, you need to learn how to do it first. You need to learn how to ask the questions about, this is essentially what he teaches, the story chart, setting characters and conflict. And then of course you got the theme and the plot, and the rising action. And so the idea is that we as the parents, we learn how to ask the questions, how to bring all this out of the story. And once we know how to do that, when we interact with our students, we're doing with them what we want them to do. So we are saying to them, like, what kind of a story is this? Is this a God versus man story? Is this a man versus man story? And we may not have the answers ourselves. We don't necessarily come to the lesson with all the answers, but we come with all the questions, because we need to know too. So this one is very important with mimetic teaching, which I think we have to do a whole evening on mimetic teaching. Yeah? Okay, sure.
Right, one of my goals this year has been to read that book, and I just have not gotten around to it. The Teaching the Classics. But I know it comes with DVDs. Like, would you suggest, like, do you have to?
You absolutely need the DVDs.
You absolutely need them. Okay.
Yes, you absolutely need the DVDs. I've watched them 3 times in a row, 3 years in a row. And you need them. You can't do without it. Yeah. So interpersonal, and then intrapersonal. Oh yes, okay, we have, let me just grab this one and this one. So for intrapersonal, one of the biggest challenges for intrapersonal actually can be behaviors and mannerisms, because they're so inside their own heads, they can't, they can like be not realize, like, you know, you just walked and bumped into the kid and he spilled his drink all over his front, and you just kept on going and you didn't even notice it. It's like, oh, is that a problem? Right? And you'd be like, yes, it is a problem. And then they're like, oh, okay, well, I'm really sorry, I shouldn't have done that. And they'll go back and they'll fix it. But they don't have a good sense of self. So I like this program. It's called Myself and Others. And it can be taught starting at about like a grade 1, 3 to 3, 4, and it goes up kind of into the more high school level. And the idea is it's meant for social understanding, habits, and manners. So it's like expressly telling your child, this is good behavior and this is bad behavior. One of the stories they use in one of the younger books is the story of the Little Red Hen, which is a story that should be brought back and read at the top of the hour, every hour. Because if you don't work, you won't eat. If you won't help with the family chores, then you can't participate in the family dinners, right? And it's just little things like that. And even as parents, like I read that one recently to my kids, and I'm like, this is what I've been trying to say, and I didn't have the words, and I read the story, and all my kids were like, oh my goodness, we better help with the chores. I'm like, well, you won't get supper. And then finally for linguistic, so this one, we went through these high school programs. This one is Art of Argument. We talked about Discovery of Deduction, and then Argument Builder. The reason why, and again, it kind of goes back to why we brought up the logic for the logical and mathematical, is because if we don't have a structure for our linguistics, if we can't put that together in a cohesive argument or a cohesive thought, then it doesn't really matter that we're linguistic learners, because we don't know how to use our language. Right? So for high school, especially, after we've poured into these linguistic kids and they've read and they've read and they've read, and they can argue until you're blue in the face and you just can't hear another word. It's really important then that we teach them how to become critical thinkers, and how to we have to show them how to use their brains to put this language into a proper flow. So that's why we think this one's actually very important for the the last one, the linguistic. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Natalie. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask questions. If you're watching online, please go ahead and type your questions in the comment bar, and we will make sure she gets them.
Thanks. Before we get to that part, I do want to highlight something that you have in your handout, and that is week 1, week 2, and week 3 of challenges. So feel free to do this over the next few weeks in your homeschools with one of your children, with all of your children. And week 1, they each have 2 tiers. So I'll say them out loud for those that are watching. So week 1, tier 1 is to observe your child's tendencies and ask them the provided questions on page 5. Or tier 2 is to create an activity or adapt what you have to teach in a style that your child loves learning through. So there are a bunch of reflection questions for you personally and for you to ask your child to help tap into what ways do they enjoy learning? What do they like about homeschool? And what do they not like about homeschool? And that will tell you what they don't like about the learning styles. And then for week 2, this shifts gears. Instead of what input they have, instead to be how they showcase and how they output their learning. So tier 1 would be to create or adapt a response so that your child shows their learning in a style that they love, or provide a choice between 3 styles that they enjoy and are comfortable with for how your child wants to show their learning. And then for week 3, we're going to stretch them into these other areas that they're not as comfortable with. So tier 1 would be to teach your child a concept using one of the styles, and then to have them showcase their learning using a different style. Or tier 2, provide a choice between 3 styles that your child is not as familiar or comfortable with for how they show their learning. And then each week also has a reflection aspect. So whether you are intrapersonal or not, I definitely recommend that you go through that reflection piece, because that will really help you connect with what went well and why, and what didn't go well and why, so that you can make adjustments for next time. And then you'll see on page 10, there is an example for you for how you can tie all of this together in the way that you teach a memory verse. So this might be a short verse. Maybe you want to use it for an entire passage, but it basically goes through day 1, day 2, day 3, how you can highlight a different one of the learning styles each of the days to really help solidify or really allow that memory verse to marinate and sink in over those 8 days. So day 1, there's an example there for how you can approach it linguistically, day 2, musically, day 3, bodily kinesthetic, day 4, visual, and so on. And so you can go ahead and go through that with your child the next time you are looking at memorizing a verse or passage. And then on the back, I do have some information about myself. If you'd like to get to know who I am a little bit better, if you showed up and you're like, who is this girl? Then that is some information for you. And again, this booklet was from inside of the membership that I have, where each month we have a completely different homeschool teaching theme. And then we go through challenges, and we meet weekly to unpack Q&A and how you can actually apply this in your home. It's really action oriented, which I think is really helpful. And then one of the people in there, Barbara, she mentioned, I feel confident to homeschool the way that I want to, but since getting Natalie's guidance with her teaching methods, I've been reignited. It's taken so much stress off and allowed us to have fun in our homeschool again. And although we were learning and we were progressing, we just weren't thriving as much as I wanted. And I realized, wait a minute, there's another way. So now that I know the teaching inspired approach, I've completely changed up how I teach my 3 kiddos and how I use our learning tools. Natalie understands what the homeschool dynamic is like and how to teach in a way that draws out your child's thinking and initiative. With other groups I've been in, they want to change how you're doing things, and they want to change you as a homeschooler to fit the mold that they've created for their family. But that's not what you get here. What you get here is an extension of what you're trying to do, but it's navigated so that you're able to see things more clearly. So when you're talking about the difficulties or the struggles, it's not bounced back at you. It's taken further so that you can see the road ahead of you. So as you go from here, I want you to think about, and then to share with the person next to you before the Q&A part, if you walk away remembering just one thing from tonight, what would that one idea or takeaway be? And take a moment, you can share that with the person next to you.
I think I felt like I'm not a very upset person anyway, but yeah, to like watch my kids and see like when they really thought it was my daughter's like, what are we doing? How are we doing that? Try to do that and my daughter's looking at me again. I was like half stakes.
Maybe 5 minutes of Q&A.
Yeah, whatever. Just a few minutes, whatever. Yeah. All right, take a moment to wrap it down. All right, so you know what's so funny is as I'm like extending my ear to these different groups, I can hear almost everybody highlighting that you learn something about yourself, like about how you tend to think and learn. That's a theme that I was hearing trickle through. So that's so cool. We have a few minutes before we will head out for the night. And I know we kind of just kept going. This was so fun. So if you need to leave, I understand. But if there are any questions, I'd be so happy to answer any questions.
I already have questions.
Yeah.
So would you say that you can also kind of find out what your child's like learning style is based off of the subjects that they love the most?
Ooh. Yes. So you can get some clues as to your child's learning style based off of what subjects they tend to prefer. That's because a lot of these subjects are naturally kind of inclined towards different things. So for example, art can be very like bodily kinesthetic or musical, or obviously science is very like linear for experiments. So yes, that's definitely a great clue to start with. It doesn't always match though, but yeah.
And how realistic is it? Because I have 4 kids, and 2 of them are homeschooling right now. But in my head, if I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed in the sense that if they all have different ways of learning, and they're all in school, and I'm trying to adapt every single lesson or subject to how they learn, that sounds like a full-time job all in itself. Like forget everything else that I have to do. So like, is it easier than I'm thinking that it is, or is it you don't have to apply it to everything, or
Yeah. I'm going to reiterate that just so that it's picked up for the recording. So what happens if you have multiple children and they each have different learning styles, and now you're looking at this as a full-time job trying to curate every single thing you do for everybody's interest? Okay, so first of all, you don't have to do everything to your child's favorite learning style. It's really helpful to understand and know that, so that when they're not connecting with something, you can try it in a different way with something that you know that they'll connect to. And then another way that you can weave this in for multiple children is to teach in one way, but then to provide choice in how they present their learning. And so that way you're doing one thing, but they still get to tap into what they know and love.
And sometimes schooling is layered as well. So you might be doing the same thing. Like we do our book work, like so like for PLOs, I do gather round. It's there. Is it engaging or whatever? Like not always. But then we do the books on the table, and then they're feasting their eyes on just whatever books they have there. So we have our read alouds, and then we go outside, or then we're doing sports outside. And then, so I'm thinking of the body. So we're looking at the body book. We're looking at like encyclopedias of the body. We're building puzzles on the body. We're going outside and doing exercise in the body. What is that? Is that your lungs? Is your heart beating faster? And it just kind of layers. So you can keep, it's like circling on all the things. And once you know them, you can know how to like weave. And like Hester was saying, what one does this curriculum do? Well, this one touches this, this, and this. And then you learn how to circle as a teacher.
Yeah, you'll hit it multiple times. And so each time you hit it, you can hit it in a new way. Unless you're using a curriculum that always hits it in the same way. Then you'll want to get creative with, okay, well, let's go outside and feel what the heart rate changes feels like.
Yeah, and then that's just where you as a teacher just equip yourself to know how do you take something that might be dry or not hitting them, like getting them.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll cover your PLOs for your teacher, but then it's not hitting their learning, and then that's where you can add on. And
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
that's my encouragement to Mama.
And I have one more question.
Okay, go for it. Yeah, I love it.
So at what age then would you say, like, is there a specific age where the kid like stops kind of developing? Because I mean, my oldest is 5, so I wouldn't imagine that she already has her like top, or maybe she already like personality wise has that top way of learning, but there may be some other ones that start like creeping in at different grades or in ages and stuff. So because I mean the brain is constantly developing. So it's obviously just like a continuation of learning how they learn as they adjust as well. But is there like a special age at some point where it's like, okay, they've reached 12, they have all of their list of like learning now and how they learn?
You bring, two really interesting ways that I want to take this. One is with the personality and one is with when can you not learn these things anymore. So with personality, we've actually talked about this where, is this linked to your personality? Is this kind of like set, like that's who you are? Dr. Lehman, a psychologist, talks about by the time you get to age 7, most of your personality is pretty much locked in, like your character development and personality is really formulated and you start to understand who you are at that point. That's not to say you can't change. I think it's what it means is that that's kind of the guideline of where you really want to do a lot of the focus for that kind of development in their character. Now, that being said, how many of us as adults have grown and changed and adjusted over time? I mean, it's the entire process of sanctification, right? So it actually is backed by scientific research of the brain in that they used to say when we were all younger that your brain stops growing around 19 or 21. And if you damage your brain cells, then you're hooped after that and you're done. But it's not true. There's a verse, his mercies are new every morning. And now they know that your brain actually creates new brain cells every single day, right up until your last day, way past 100, however long you can live. So that is super encouraging that you can create new neural pathways and new ways of thinking, and you can grow and strengthen things that are already set and things that are not yet there, and you can learn new things at any age. So that was a really roundabout way of saying I would not say that there's a set age because obviously there's just way too many variables we see with different people, but it's also so encouraging that there's no set age and there's no time that we can't start learning something or repair even damage that may have been done. If we bring home a high schooler and think, oh, how can I get us back to a place that's going to be working with like the family dynamic and with community dynamics, and it's definitely possible at any time. Yeah.
I also just wanted to add because I have 4 kids, but I'm homeschooling 3 of them, and as you said, you don't always have to tailor everything specifically to their favorite learning style, but offering that feast can come as a group activity. So like I have my little guy who loves math and he loves to bake. Sorry,
I'm just gonna go like that.
But my other girls, like they don't necessarily love that, but when we do it as a group activity, they get to taste a little bit of that feast, and it kind of dips their toes into things they wouldn't necessarily go for. So it's not really a bad thing to just kind of include everybody and maybe even just focus on, okay, well, today we're going to bake, tomorrow we're going to do art. And my little guy doesn't like art, but the girls do. So it's kind of like offering everybody a little bit of everything, but not like we're only going to do baking with you. We're only going to do art with you. That way it kind of helps them see what they like and develop that learning style.
Exactly. They may not know that they like that until they've tried it.
One thing that I've read the book, and kind of the conclusion of the book was
is that I think if I remember correctly, her parents actually did a really good job, I think, of like actually having a bunch of different things she was actually interacting with. And she actually says that. She says not to just completely hone in to two things. She said that generally there's about two main learning styles that you have as a child or just even as a person, but don't hone in because again, she said actually to be a more well-rounded person and be able to be very flexible in a lot of different situations. Cause like, let's be real, a boss is not going to care if you're a freaking kinetic person. Yeah. Jump up and down when I tell you the rules of your job, right? Like it's just not going to happen. So she actually says to not get stuck and pigeonholed into this, but just be aware of it, kind of an idea. Yeah.
Yes, 100%.
So I just have a question about something that you said earlier. You said to steer clear from saying like what your child's strength is, right? That was kind of the idea we're saying. Okay, so I have a 6-year-old and then I have 4-year-old twins. So my 6-year-old, we're teaching her how to read, yada yada yada. The 4-year-old sister has picked up on it and she can now read better than my 6-year-old. So it's very obvious that my 6-year-old struggles and is not good at reading compared to my 4-year-old. So I've phrased it as like, people have strengths and this is not your strength right now. She's picked up on it quicker and you're like, how do you phrase that? Because like, it's very normal and I feel like we should accept that some people will pick something up quicker and it's harder for us to learn in certain ways. And like, you can't necessarily teach a kid how to read, cater to all these styles, because reading is kind of like memorizing, essentially.
Yeah.
Right? So like, how do you phrase that? How do you like encourage her? You know what I'm asking?
Yes, I'm going to reiterate it.
Okay.
Because then you'll know that I know what you're talking about. But also so it picks up. Your 4-year-old is learning to read faster than your 6-year-old and is actually showing a much greater strength than your 6-year-old. And it's so obvious to your 6-year-old that their younger sibling is like better at this than they are. And so how can you word these things to them so that it's not causing like negative belief systems that they then like shut down from, and then don't continue to grow. So I'm really glad you asked this because we do need to recognize in ourselves what kinds of strengths or weaknesses we have and what kind of gifts that we have and things that we are naturally inclined to. So that is verbiage that would be appropriate. I think it's more along the lines of you're better at this or this is what you are, and like that pigeonhole idea. Like if we're saying it in a way that it's defining them or their identity, or maybe it's not even like so core as our identity, but defining what they're capable of, then that is putting limitations that don't need to be put on them. But saying, yeah, they have a natural strength here. Isn't that amazing? What kind of things are your natural strengths? And let's work at both growing these kinds of areas and growing our natural strengths so that we can look at what kinds of opportunities you'll really enjoy later on in life, because this is something that comes easier for you. It's a really delicate one. So if you think, oh, this might be putting a limitation or a barrier on them, and that kind of like clicks in, you get that red flag in your mind, then it's something that probably don't say. However, it is okay to recognize like kind of what's obvious sometimes.
And like
Yeah.
people have to work harder to learn certain things. Because like reading, it's just you can't cater all these learning styles to reading, right?
Yes, you can. So if somebody is struggling with reading, it doesn't mean that they're a bad reader, right? It's a matter of how can we tap into learning reading in a way that is going to be accessible for you. So that's kind of the shift in, it's a subtle shift, but it's really profound.
One more, and then I have to. Okay. because we're going on 8:30.
We are okay.
You could also just like sympathize with her through your own experiences, like something that you used to not be good at. And now you can, like when I was in second grade, I could hardly read and I had to go to special reading classes. A little bit embarrassing, like leave the room, like, bye guys. And I can read now. So you can tell her a story like that. And then she'll be like, oh, mom understands me. And that might be helpful.
Yeah, and the point that nobody ever asks anybody, how old were you when you learned to read? Yeah, but it can be across any of the topics, right? Like, oh, you don't know how to paint a horizon? Like, no, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Oh goodness. Okay. So Shannon on our live stream, Shannon says, no questions, but Natalie is wonderful in helping to encourage and facilitate our roles in homeschooling. So thankful for her and the community she's built. And then also, it's more about the connection than the curriculum. Once connected, the curriculum will just be a bonus too. So there's a little tip from Shannon online. Thank you, Shannon. Okay, and then with that, I want to say thank you, Natalie. I told her before she came that you were a very hearty audience and that I hadn't yet seen you get antsy or bored. And here we are, hour and a half. And I think we probably could still go for another half an hour. But I think we do need to wrap it up. So thank you for coming. This has been invaluable. I'm really grateful for you being a